Howdy campers, Kari coming back to you with some more Pokemon TCG content, and with the release of Twilight Masquerade this past week, I thought it would be a good idea to come to you with some deck lists that I've been trying out since the new set dropped on TCG Live to kind of give people a jump start on the set, give people an idea of what they may be interested in, and kind of go from there, give you where my thoughts are at this moment. So with that, I'm going to present to you real quick 10 deck lists for the early Twilight Masquerade metagame. So, to kick things off, we're going to start with one of the poster children of this set in Dragapult EX with its powerful Phantom Dive attack, doing 200 damage and allowing you to place 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench. To back up Dragapult, we have Dracloak as its stage 1 with its equally powerful Recon Directive ability that allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, select one to put in your hand while you put the other one on the bottom of your deck, giving you some added consistency as well as knowledge of your deck's ordering as you move later and later into the game. To compensate for Dragapult's somewhat awkward attack cost, we've chosen to include Xatu as a means of energy acceleration while also adding a little bit more draw into the list. For additional consistency, we've included Rotom V and Lumineon V in addition to a 4 count of Arven and 4 of Sealstone to give us access to a V-Star power during the game. And to help close things out, we have Radiant Charizard included because at this point in the metagame there are a lot of big basic EX decks that in some cases can knock out Dragapult in a single hit, allowing them to trade 2 for 2 or in some cases better than 2 for 2. So having a single price Pokemon that is capable of knocking out most if not all basic EXs in a single hit is a big boon. In this list specifically, we've chosen to include Scoop Up Cyclone as the ace spec of choice to allow us in several instances to be able to recycle our Dragapult EX if it does not die in a single hit, thanks to our thick line of a 4/4/3 Dragapult. And what you'll be able to do in this case is take a hit with your initial Dragapult, scoop it up, plop down a fresh one, and allow it to continue sprinkling damage across your opponent's board, taking multiple prizes in a single turn, hopefully. This also serves as a means to get Pokemon such as Xatu, Rotom, Manaphy, Lumineon, or Tatsugiri out of your active spot if you're playing up against something that's utilizing the Pokemon Go Snorlax and its powerful block ability. If you weren't going to play Scoop Up Cyclone because you wanted to play something like Unfair Stamp or Prime Catcher or Maximum Belt as your ace spec, then I would still probably recommend that you find a spot somewhere to include a copy of Professor Turo's Scenario, because that scoop capability, especially in your supporter slot or in some cases an item slot, is just very powerful and shouldn't be overlooked. Moving to our second list, we're still sticking with the Dragapult family, but this time pairing it up with the Lost Zone engine. And notably, what the Lost Zone allows Dragapult to do is perform as a single prize deck until you have the moment that you want to switch gears and put your powerful 2-prize attacker on the board. You can start games off with early Cramorant attacks. Sometimes you can accelerate very quickly to 10 cards in your Lost Zone, and you can start attacking with Sableye's Lost Mine ability. And then we still, in this case, have Radiant Charizard to help us close games out. Or in some instances with this deck, because of the acceleration offered by Mirage Gate, we can potentially attack with Charizard more than once in a given game. There's not too much to say. It's kind of just a mishmash of Dragapult EX with Lost Zone. Probably not the best way to play either of these things, but it is a lot of fun, and I recommend you give it a try. Our next deck kind of arrived on the scene as a counter of sorts to Dragapult EX in response to its early dominance in Japan, and that is the Blissey EX deck. And to many players' chagrin, we've chosen to include the Chansey from Twilight Masquerade with its Lucky Attachment attack, rather than the Chansey from Pokemon Go. And the main reason for this is just that Lost Zone is still a very powerful deck. Cramorant is a very powerful early attacker, and its Spin Innocently attack happens to do 110 damage. The Chansey from the 151 set has 110 HP. Therefore, we've chosen to go with the 120 HP option to allow us to not potentially be donked on turn 1. Blissey gets paired up with its massive 300 HP with Monkey Dory, which is another really neat inclusion from this new set with its Adrenabrain ability that states as long as Monkey Dory has a Darkness Energy attached to it, you get to move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon, which acts both as an alternate damage source and an ability to heal one of your Pokemon throughout the game. Monkey Dory and Blissey have this really interesting relationship because Blissey has a really large HP pool to work with, and its Happy Switch ability means that you could potentially be powering multiple Monkey Dories up, or at least activating their Adrenabrain abilities, I should say, with one Dark Energy and just bouncing it between your different Monkey Dories. if you have an instance where your Monkey Dories may not be able to heal your Blissey out of a KO, you have multiple copies of Charon's Care in this list to pick up Blissey from your active spot, promote a new Blissey, and continue swinging. You can do some neat plays with this where you could potentially activate Happy Switch with your active Blissey to move an energy, Charon's Care it into your hand, promote a Chansey, evolve it, and then reuse that Happy Switch ability because the ability has been reset as Blissey has gone to your hand. Rather than including 4 copies of Charon's Care, we've chosen to include 1 copy of Turo's Scenario to potentially pick up either Monkey Dory or Hoopa EX in certain situations where you may not want this Pokemon on the field. Hoopa EX is included as an answer to Blissey mirror matches because those can get really grindy and be really difficult to navigate, especially if you end up falling behind at some point during the game. There's not much to say about this deck. It's actually rather straightforward, but you do get to do some interesting things, and I would liken it to Arceus variants of the past. So if those ever interested you, maybe you should take this deck out for a spin. Following that up, we're going to talk about another really cool archetype coming out of the set with the Festival Lead deck. And so the way that this combo all fits together is that there are multiple Pokemon in the set, which include Dipplin, Goldeen, and Swirlix, that have the Festival Lead ability that states as long as you have a Festival Grounds Stadium in play, these Pokemon can attack twice. Unfortunately, these attacks don't combo with the technical machines, so we can't use something like Devolution twice in a turn or Evolution twice in a turn. Probably a good idea from the developers because that would be an absurdly powerful turn. But instead, we get to do things like Diplin's Do the Wave Attack, which does 20 damage for each of our bench Pokemon. And from face value, this doesn't sound absurdly powerful. I mean, you're doing 200 damage during a turn, but when you combo it with the fact that you can do this second attack even if you take a knockout with your first one, and the multitude of damage modifiers that we play in this deck, including Defiance Band, Vitality Band, and Kieran as one of the new supporters that can function either as a switch or as a damage amplifier, depending on what we need to do in a given situation. The thing that really makes this archetype tick, though, is the Thwackey with its Boom Boom Groove ability that states as long as you have a Pokemon in your active spot with Festival Lead, you can search your deck for any card. So that is the ability to do multiple Pidgeot EX quick searches on a single prize stage 1 that just has to sit on your bench. Now sometimes things can get a little bit difficult, having to constantly put new Dipplins into your active spot to activate that Festival Lead ability, so we've included a single copy of Goldeen in this deck, along with a rescue board to act as a pivot and a hopefully guarantee that we will always have access to Festival Lead and therefore Boom Boom Groove as the game progresses. There can be some awkward spots where Boom Boom Groove may not be able to get you all of the cards you need, even though you're able to use it multiple times in a given turn. So we've included a 1-1 Bibarel line to hopefully draw some number of cards and then fill in the gaps with Boom Boom Groove. There are some very powerful search and item cards associated with this, such as the new Bug Catching set, which can grab any of the grass Pokemon that you see here, in addition to Grass Energy, to allow us to power our attacks. We had the powerful Buddy Buddy Poffin from the previous set that can grab any basic from our deck and put it onto our bench. And then we get to do some kind of cute things here with a low energy count and kind of working around that by still having copies of Super Rod. We have Roseanne's Backup that can replenish a stadium in our festival grounds, one of our damage amplifying tools. It can recycle energy into our deck. And then we have Lana's Aid as well, which can recycle energy and or Pokemon that don't have rule boxes into our hand. And as our entire deck is non-rule box, you can recycle any Pokemon at your hand with Lana's Aid. The other key point in this specific list is the Hyper Aroma A-Spec, which is an item card that allows you to search your deck for 3 stage 1s, which could be very powerful, exploding out of the gate on something like turn 2, maybe turn 3, depending on when you draw into it. I think it's a great budget deck, and something that, just give it a try. See what you think. This next one is a deck that I had a lot of hope for coming into the set, and unfortunately I think it's going to settle probably somewhere in the B or C tier, and that is Greninja EX paired up with Frostlass. Now, Greninja EX is a very interesting card for a single water energy. Its Shinobi Blade attack does 170 damage, and then you're able to search your deck for any card and put it into your hand. It then has a very, very powerful Mirage Barrage attack for water and a double colorless, in this instance fulfilled by water and double turbo most times, that you discard 2 energies from Greninja, and you do 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, if we discard our double turbo, we do still unfortunately suffer the damage reduction effect from double turbo, so it would be 100 damage to 2 different Pokemon. But that is still more powerful than the current Radiant Greninja's attack, and that card sees plenty of play as an attacker, so I think that Greninja EX is doing fine. Now you might say, hurry, Greninja EX's attack sounds like it's stopped by Manaphy. Are we ever going to be able to use that? And that's where Frostlass comes in. With its Freezing Shroud ability, Frostlass puts 1 damage counter between turns on each Pokemon in play with an ability. And because of this, it makes it a little bit difficult to fill decks like these out with other ability-laden Pokemon. We've still chosen to include a copy of Manaphy, specifically for our early game, so some of our squishier basic and Stage 1 Pokemon don't necessarily get picked off by something like opposing Greninja EX, or Radiant Greninja, or any other Pokemon that can snipe onto the bench. And Rotom V has proven itself as a mainstay in many Stage 2 decks as a means of just getting yourself into the game, despite it being a liability as the game moves deeper and deeper. We do still have a copy of Turo's Scenario to potentially remove one of those liabilities from the field, or to recycle our Greninja EX and put it back into play after it's been damaged by an opponent's attack. We have a suite of consistency trainers and supporters. A lot of times your main draw is going to be Shinobi Blading for your supporter for your next turn, and then utilizing that to kind of just see what options you have, and you really just play from the board most of the time with this deck. The ace spec in this deck is very flexible. It's something where you could play Prime Catcher, you could choose to play Hyper Aroma and potentially add a second Frogadier to the deck to just bolster some of your counts and to make that card more efficacious. But in this instance, I wanted to include Unfair Stamp to give us something that we could search out with either Irida or Arven or maybe Forest Sealstone, and give us access to a disruption card that isn't our supporter for turn. So we could hopefully play Unfair Stamp and Counter Catcher, or Unfair Stamp and Boss's Orders, and kind of hit that double whammy of Gust plus Disruption that has proven to be very potent since A-Specs were first introduced. This next deck is another deck that I was very excited about, and that is the Palafin EX deck, where you get to cosplay as Superman. Because in order to get the powerful Palafin EX into play, you have to first put the regular Palafin that was introduced in this set, with its Zero to Hero ability, onto one of your Finizens. Then you have to retreat, or otherwise move that Palafin from your active to your bench. Then you get to activate the ability, shuffle the Palafin into your deck, and take a Palafin EX from your deck and put it on top of the Finizen instead. And you may be thinking to yourself, why would I want to do this? It's a lot of hoops to jump through. It sounds kind of difficult to do. What's the payoff here? And I think the payoff comes in the form of having a 340 HP Stage 1 that does 250 damage for a single energy. Now, there is the drawback that you can't attack with the same Palafin on the next turn, but because you already want to play so many switching cards, a lot of times you can get around this effect, not a problem. One of the ways that we get around this is by utilizing the Abra from this set, and its Teleporter ability that states whenever Abra is in the active spot, you can just shuffle it into your deck. And so sometimes what we may do is either play a Switch to promote Abra, or a Jet Energy attached to Abra to promote it to the active, and then shuffle Abra away, push our newly found Palafin EX to the front, and smack something for big damage. And in addition to that, we still have Prime Catcher, which acts as a switching option, as well as a gusting option to be able to pick off some of these lower HP Pokemon that your opponent may be trying to hide on their bench, so we can take easy 2-prize knockouts. There are some Pokemon, such as Charizard EX or the aforementioned Dragapult EX, that can be difficult for Palafin EX to knock out, and there are times where just one attack isn't going to be enough. And to compensate for this, I've chosen to include a copy of Monkey Dory in this deck as well. It's a Bane ability, again, very powerful in keeping these beefier Pokemon alive, as well as adding additional damage to your opponent's board. And the other way that we're trying to get around this in the form of both softening up our opponent's Pokemon as well as finishing off Pokemon that may have tried to run away to the bench is with the Palafin from Obsidian Flames with its Jet Punch attack that does 30 damage to your opponent's active and 30 damage to your opponent's bench. There's a lot of switching in and out. You get to see the Superman effect in full effect with Palafin as it dives into and out of your deck. One other card for consideration in this deck is probably a copy of Skwovet that would allow you to put any Palafin EXs that have found their way to your hand back on the bottom of your deck, because unfortunately Palafin EX can only come into play if it is currently in your deck. So that's definitely something to keep in mind and maybe worth finding a cut from this list to include it. This next deck is very reminiscent of some other kind of stally, grindy decks in the past in the form of what people like to call a quad deck. So we've got Quad Iron Thorns EX here with its initialization ability that states as long as Iron Thorns EX is in the active spot, no Pokemon in play that have rule boxes have abilities except for other future Pokemon. So this shuts off notably Pidgeot EX, Rotom V, Lugia V-Star, Charizard EX, along with many others. But the downside to this card is that its attack is not super powerful. For a lightning and double colorless, Iron Thorns EX does 140 damage, and you have to cycle one energy attached to Iron Thorns EX to one of your Pokemon on your bench. Now, in this deck, the only other Pokemon that we play are other copies of Iron Thorns EX, so we would just be swapping energy between them and, kind of keeping things powered up as we go. So it functions as a self-sustaining engine. There can be times where the energy lines can get a little bit awkward, so it's something to keep in mind that there may be instances that you actually don't want to put a second Iron Thorns on your bench just for the sake of not having to put other energy in play. But the entire point of this deck is to be as disruptive as possible, so we're including cards such as Crushing Hammer, Grabber, Lost City and Canceling Cologne to allow us to get around Mimikyu's pesky ability, multiple copies of Airy. We're actually playing cards like Giovanni's Charisma and Handheld Fan to attack our opponent's energy supply even more, as well as potentially allowing us to get extra energies in play if we happen to fall behind early. And then multiple hand disruption supporters with Iono and Judge to try to keep our opponents on the back foot. This deck's relatively simple. It's actually also a relatively easy to build budget deck. Another interesting inclusion here is the Legacy Energy, which is a rainbow energy that once per game causes the Pokemon that is attached to give up one less prize card when it is knocked out. So unless our opponent is packing a copy of Temple of Sinnoh or Enhanced Hammer, they actually would have to go through all 4 of our Iron Thorns EX to win a game. And that's something that can be very difficult for a lot of decks to accomplish. This next deck has kind of broken on the scene as a sort of surprise since the set first came out. A lot of people were very excited for Raging Bolt EX when it first came out in the previous set with its powerful Bellowing Thunder attack that does 70 damage for each energy that you discard from your field to your opponent's active Pokemon. And the initial pairing for this card was with Sandy Shocks EX, but the difficulty in that was that Sandy Shocks didn't come online until your opponent was already kind of rolling with their setup and had knocked out one of your 2 prize Pokemon. So, with the introduction of Twilight Masquerade, we now have access to Teal Mask Ogerpon EX with the powerful Teal Dance ability that allows it to attach a basic grass energy from your hand to itself and then draw an additional card from your deck. So we get to kind of turbo through our deck with our Radiant Greninja Conceal cards, Teal Dances from Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, Squawk and Seize from Squawkabilly EX, Pokestop, Professor Sada's Vitality drawing additional cards, and then trying to keep our energies flowing with cards like Professor Sada's Vitality, copies of Energy Retrieval and Superior Energy Retrieval, and Earthen Vessel to search our deck for those energy cards, as well as fueling our discard pile for our Professor Sada plays. Raging Bolt EX's massive 240 HP is further augmented by Bravery Charm, making this 2-prize Pokemon very difficult to knock out, even though it's only a basic. This deck has some very explosive turns, can very easily do 280 damage on the first turn going second, and it can a lot of times run players off the board before they have a chance to set up. The deck does struggle somewhat into decks like Charizard EX, but Charizard is kind of on a downswing with this set, with some of the other options that we've listed here. And for now, at least, it hasn't seen a ton of play, so maybe Raging Bolt does have a place to stay in this meta. The last deck I want to talk about was Lugia V-Star. Now, Lugia has kind of been a deck since it first came out that's hard to ignore. People are always trying to make it work because the Summoning Star ability is extremely powerful when paired up with Archeops from the same set. Primal Turbo, searching your deck for 2 special energy cards and attaching them to one of your Pokemon, it's extremely powerful. We saw this Cinccino from this most recent set with the special roll attack doing 70 damage for each of the attached special energy, being an immediate slot in. One of the compensations we've made with this new set is swapping out some count of our Call for Family Minchinos for the 70 HP Minchinos, so they don't just instantly get picked off by Dragon Bolt EX attacks. And then with the addition of that Legacy Energy that I talked about with the Iron Thorns deck list, we're able to go back to using some more, rainbow-colored attackers in the form of Iron Hands EX and Wellspring Ogrepawn EX, who both take advantage of that rainbow cost fulfillment to do powerful attacks like Iron Hand's widely known Amp You Very Much attack to take additional prize cards on low HP Pokemon, and Wellspring Ogrepawn EX giving the deck access to bench damage, which it has just sorely lacked for the longest time. Its Torrential Pump attack does 100 damage, and you can return 3 energies attached to Wellspring Ogrepawn EX to your deck to do 120 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Some other tools that the deck has picked up are Carmine, which is kind of like Professor Research Light, in that you discard your hand, but you only draw 5 cards. The reason that this card is kind of advantageous in this deck is that you're actually able to play it on the first turn. So rather than having to wait and hope that you can discard the Archeops that you search for on your first turn, when you get to roll around and finally either attack or use a supporter, you can actually dump them straight away when you find them with your Luminion V's Luminous Sign. With that Legacy energy, we can actually also attack with Luminion V to help get it off the field more easily and remove some of the easier to knock out 2-prize liabilities from our board. Looks to be a powerful deck. I think a lot of people need to watch out for it. The biggest issue that I've had playing this deck is just that it has some inherent inconsistencies that can sometimes keep it from winning games that you feel like you otherwise should have won. And it's just something you may need to watch out for. But with Legacy energy in the pool and Primal Turbo being as powerful as it is, you can kind of experiment with things and put in some attackers that may catch your opponents off guard. So have some fun experimenting with that. And then to close things out, this deck is kind of cheap, wouldn't necessarily qualify it as a new deck by any means, but I wanted to highlight something that could play the Secret Box Ace spec. And Secret Box is a very interesting card. It's not the most powerful Ace spec in the world. I think that still lies in the realm of Prime Catcher or Unfair Stamp, but Secret Box lets you discard 3 cards from your hand, which combos very well with the Roaring Moon from the previous set, and then you get to search your deck for a Stadium, a Tool card, a Supporter, and an Item card. So you can go grab things like Professor Sada's Vitality, a Pokestop, an Ancient Energy Booster Capsule, and maybe an Earthen Vessel or a Nest Ball to kind of get your setup going. And then from there, the other thing that Ancient Box's deck has gained in this set is another high HP 1 retreat cost Pokemon in the form of Walking Wake. Previously, this slot was taken up by Koraidon, and while you were able to attack with Koraidon in a lot of matchups, players weren't often too happy about it. Koraidon wasn't the best attacker. Your damage was often capped because you didn't necessarily want to fill your board because you were trying to fuel your discard pile for your Roaring Moon attacks. And then at the same time, Koraidon had a 2 retreat cost, which made it very difficult to move from your active spot, and your opponent could take advantage of this by constantly gusting Koraidon up and forcing you to burn energies to move it back to your bench. The deck's relatively straightforward. You just kind of want to turbo cards into your discard pile and just attack with Roaring Moon for as much damage as possible. Notably, in the current state of the format, Stage 2 EXs are not seeing as much play, so you can kind of hit the damage thresholds that you need to with Roaring Moon a little bit more easily than you could in the previous format. So while Ancient Box isn't the most glamorous deck to play and isn't flashy by any means, isn't playing a bunch of new cards, it's something that if you don't want to sink a bunch of money into this new set, maybe you just grab your Walking Wakes, you grab your Secret Box, and you keep rolling with what you were already playing in the last set. So I hope one of these 10 deck lists caught your eye. If you had any thoughts on any of them, let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll have all of these lists available for import into PTCGL on the Discord, which will be down in the description below. If you liked the video, consider giving us a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel. We're going to be putting out more Pokemon content, Lorcana content, and Star Wars Unlimited content as we move forward with the coming weeks and months, with a lot of new releases for all of these sets, some tournament recaps from myself, Dead Broke Nerd, Gibbles and Bits, and Mark. And, if that's something that you're interested in, we hope to see you soon.